My name's Zach, and I'm here on behalf of Oxford Vegan Action, which is Oxford's largest organised group of animal rights activists. Our aim is to raise awareness for animal suffering and to lead people towards a vegan lifestyle. My talk today is entitled Veganism, What Difference Can We Make? And there are going to be two main focus points of the talk today. Why veganism? And why activism? But before I start my talk, I'd just like to, for reference sake, by a show of hands, find out how many people in the room are not vegan. Okay, great, that's great. I'm assuming that anyone here who's not vegan is here because they've got an interest in veganism, which is fantastic. That shows that veganism is growing. All we want to do really is inspire you and motivate you and help you learn a little bit more so you can make informed decisions. How many of the people in the room are vegetarian or already on the path to moving towards a reduced meat sort of diet? Okay, fantastic, okay. So if you're not vegan, it's possible that I will be challenging some of your beliefs today. And if you have any questions, please feel free to raise them at the end of the talk. I love to have debates with people, and if you feel that I've said anything that's inaccurate, I'd like to hear that, because the last thing I want to do is give you any misinformation. We're here to spread facts, and we're here to make sure that people can be informed. We can only do that if the information we're giving out is accurate. If you are already vegan, there's a chance that I'm going to be challenging some of your worldviews as well. And again, I welcome any questions. I would request that any questions be left sort of to the end of the talk, where there'll be a Q&A session. So, we also have a main stall in the main area of the festival upstairs. I think it's sort of towards the left-hand side of the room, but it's, yeah, so it's called Oxford Vegan Action, and I'll be there later on, so you should be able to spot us. If you'd like to learn anything more about getting involved in activism, then feel free to pop by the stall at the end, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. And we've got a sign-up sheet so people can sign up to get more information. We've also got a Facebook group that's called Oxford Vegan Action, which you can just go and join if you're interested in becoming an animal rights activist. I'm going to start my talk today with an analogy, which I might come back to a little bit later on. I'd like you all to imagine that you are walking through the high street and you see a group of people gathered round in a circle, holding crowbars and bats and other weapons. As you get closer, you realise that they are beating a puppy. The police are nearby watching. They're not doing anything. They're not concerned. Maybe one or two of them are joining in. Now, in these circumstances, you have three main options. Option number one is to join in and help them beat the puppy. Obviously, none of us would want to do that, I would hope. Option number two is to walk away, to do nothing. You're outnumbered. Getting involved could be potentially dangerous. Now, some of you might have already figured out I'm making a sort of analogy to illustrate the differences between meat eaters and vegans. However, it's a little more complicated than that. In this analogy, the option to join in and help them beat the dog represents the choice to consume meat, dairy, and eggs, or to wear fur, or to use other animal products. The option to walk away is veganism. Veganism simply means not partaking in any forms of animal exploitation. It doesn't mean actually doing anything. It doesn't mean jumping in. It doesn't mean putting yourself at risk. It simply means choosing not to take part in something that you perceive to be morally wrong. But as I said, there is a third option. You could choose to put yourself at risk of harm or potential ridicule, verbal abuse, by actively intervening, either telling the people to stop beating the puppy, explaining to them why they're wrong, or even physically getting in the way and trying to save the puppy. This is action. This is what the decision to become an activist represents. We're not crazy, self-righteous street preachers. We're simply people who believe in a moral code and want to stand up for that moral code. This talk is a bit of a journey through the decision-making process that leads us towards becoming vegan and then potentially becoming an activist. The first step in that journey is becoming vegan. As I'm sure most of you are aware, there are three main reasons that people might choose to go vegan. The first reason is health. The China study, which is the most comprehensive study that's been done on human diets to date throughout all of history, has shown that vegans live on average, I believe, about 8 to 10 years longer than meat eaters. In fact, eating animal products such as meat, dairy and eggs has been linked to some of the world's most common deadly diseases, such as diabetes, heart disease, osteoporosis and even cancer. The World Health Organization has now labelled processed meats as a Class 1 carcinogen, which means they're in the same category as tobacco and asbestos. There's a couple of quotes up here on the screen. I'm not going to read them out to you. If you're interested in exact statistics, they're up there. But I'm sure lots of you might have seen articles in magazines and newspapers quoting a different cause of cancer every week. This week it's bread. Next week it's sun cream, or the week after that it might be Donald Trump. But this is usually based on misunderstandings from not properly reading scientific studies. We shouldn't really be getting health advice from The Sun or the Daily Mail when we don't even trust them to do what they're there to do, which is report the news. The World Health Organization, however, is more of a big deal. It's generally accepted by experts in the medical field that what they say goes when it comes to cancer causes. It was only when the World Health Organization officially labelled tobacco as a carcinogen that doctors started taking the research seriously. The second reason for going vegan is the environment. Now, again, I've got a couple more health studies up there that you can take a look at. But I'm going to move on to the environment now. As we know, global warming is an ever-increasing problem. We know that the number one cause of deforestation, greenhouse gas emissions, species extinction, environmental decay is animal agriculture. That's raising livestock for meat, dairy and eggs. The lifestyle with the lowest carbon footprint has been proven to be an organic, plant-based vegan lifestyle. Both of these reasons for going vegan are only really reasons for going plant-based, and there's an important distinguishment between the two. You could eat an entirely vegan diet, but if you still wear leather or fur or ride horses or hunt or throw stones at cats or whatever, you wouldn't be a vegan. Which brings us to the final reason for going vegan, which is morality. This is usually the determining factor. You may have heard statistics out there suggest that a large number of people who go vegan go back to eating meat. And it bugged me seeing statistics like that. So I started looking into why anyone would make such a moral-based change in their lifestyles and then go back. And it turns out that the majority of people who go back to eating meat actually went vegan for health-based reasons or for environmental reasons and not ethical reasons. And also those who eat vegans for sort of fashion fad reasons because celebrities are doing it, because it's what's cool, which seems to be a big thing in America. But these reasons alone are often not enough to simply motivate someone to make a lifelong change. In truth, misinformation about veganism mostly comes from these people because they're not truly vegan. They identify themselves as vegan because it's simpler, because they're eating a plant-based diet, because people will understand it more. But this is perhaps one of the most important points I will make today. Veganism is not a diet. Veganism is in no way about what you eat or what you do not eat. It's not about health. That's just sort of an added bonus, although admittedly it's quite nice added bonus. Veganism is not a diet, it's an ethical standard. Veganism is the belief that we don't have the right to exploit or to murder living beings, simply because they are not as smart or evolved as us. I, for one, would still be vegan even if it meant that I became sick or unhealthy. But the brilliant thing is that that doesn't happen. All the people that I've known to move over to a balanced vegan diet have always found themselves to be healthier for it. Now, as with any diet, you've got your junk foods, you've got your cakes, we've got burgers and ice creams covering the festival today. So obviously there are your unhealthier junk foods. But in general, people switching over to a plant-based diet find themselves to be much, much healthier. I could waffle on about the advantages of being vegan for hours if I wanted to, because there are quite a lot. But the truth is, there are already people in the world who've said it better than me. And a large number of people in this room are probably already convinced. A large number of you are probably already vegan. But for the sake of anyone who is interested in the health side of the plant-based diet, I would recommend that you watch the documentary What the Health, which is exploring misconceptions about health and some of the world's most deadly killers and how diet affects those diseases. And I would also recommend, if you're big on reading The China Study and also How Not to Die by Dr. Michael Greger, which are both really interesting books that dive into nutrition and diet and how they affect the human species. The reason I suggest you do that research rather than throwing statistics at you is because I'm not an expert and they are. And I think that the best thing that you can do, not trust anything I say, not take anything I say at face value, do your own research. I think that's one of the most important things that we can learn. Also, if you're interested in the environmental side of how animal agriculture is affecting the planet, Cowspiracy dives into the animal agriculture industry and the effects that it's having. I mentioned earlier that it's the largest cause of deforestation and greenhouse gas emission. It's actually has much bigger impacts on the environment than the whole transportation sector combined. So I would recommend watching Cowspiracy and Seaspiracy, which focuses on the effects that we're having on the sea ecosystem of marine life, which is incredibly important because if the marine life dies out, the rest of the planet follows. All of the ecosystems on our planet depend on each other, so it's a very important thing. If you're interested in the ethics side of it, I would recommend Earthlings, Greatest Speech You'll Ever Hear, and The Land of Hope and Glory, which are all these are available online. We have little leaflets at our stall outside, which talk about what movies and stuff that you can watch for more information. This is the next section of my talk. I'm going to get a little bit philosophical here, so you're going to have to bear with me for a minute. Because this is all vital, this is all important in getting my point across. The main reason for going vegan is that we believe that cruelty to animals is immoral. Eventually, we all have to make a crucial decision on how we view morality. We have to decide whether we view morality as objective or subjective. And what that basically means is, if we view morality as subjective, then it means it's a matter of opinion. We make our own decisions on what we believe to be right or wrong, but we accept that those decisions are simply our opinion, and they may not apply to other people from other cultures and other ways of life. If you believe that circumcision is wrong, for example, and you would never circumcise your child, but you think that religious freedom is important, and you have no issue with people of certain religions circumcising their children, and you don't think that you have a right to tell them that they're wrong, even though you wouldn't do it yourself, that might be an example of subjective morality. It basically means that what you believe to be wrong, you do not believe you have the right to tell other people, and you do not believe that other people have the right to tell you what is right or wrong. The alternative is believing that morality is objective. This means that it is fact. This means that some things are intrinsically right and some things are intrinsically wrong, regardless of what the rest of the world thinks. So if you're the only person left on the planet that believes that rape is wrong, everyone else has decided that it's okay, rape is still wrong, regardless of what everyone else thinks. Even if someone tells you that in their culture it's acceptable, even if everyone disagrees with you and you're the only person left, that still applies because you believe morality to be based in fact. This section of the talk is about vegan activists. As a group, vegan activists are not particularly popular in modern society Meat eaters tend to find us preachy and self-righteous. Vegetarians see us as extreme, and even some vegans tend to think that we're a bit too forceful. Anyone who knows me will know that I try to always remain polite and civil. However, when I take part in animal rights activism, I often have people approach me in the streets and tell me that I'm hostile or forceful or extreme. Some friends tell me that I change when it comes to activism. I have people telling me that I'm wasting my time, that I can't hope to make a difference, that what I'm doing is very wrong. I've heard people say things like, I don't have a problem with vegans as long as they don't try to force their views on me, as long as they don't try and force me to be vegan. I've even heard other vegans say, live and let live. If you believe being vegan is right for you, then that's fine, but don't force it on others. These are examples of people who believe in subjective morality. The problem here is that these people, the majority of people, generally like to pick and choose when they view morality as objective or subjective, based on when it best suits them, which leads to quite a lot of hypocrisy. When it comes to others criticising their way of life, morality is subjective, and no one has the right to tell them what is right or wrong, regardless of the evidence that is thrown at them, because morality isn't based in fact, it's based in opinion. Vegans think eating meat is wrong, but that's just their opinion. But the same people, if someone attempted to physically assault them, would very quickly change their tune. They would believe that they were a victim and that the attacker was morally, objectively wrong. They will not accept that it's a matter of opinion. The attacker is intrinsically wrong. Morality is objective, and they say the attacker is wrong, therefore the attacker is wrong regardless of what other people believe. They do have the right to tell the attacker to stop attacking them. This fluid view of morality has been so consistent within our society that people don't even realise that they're doing it. And even after a person turns vegan, it can be difficult to convince them that morality is not subjective, even when it comes to animal rights. It comes down to this. If there is a moral code that governs what is right and wrong in the universe, then morality is always objective, even when it doesn't suit us, even when it's inconvenient. But if morality is a concept that we've invented and is solely a matter of personal opinion on what we believe we want to live our life as, if a person holds the view that murder, violent assault, theft are all morally acceptable, we have no right to tell them otherwise. And we have no right to tell other people what to eat. The truth of the matter is, most people do believe that morality is objective. They believe that if a child is kidnapped, the kidnapper is objectively a bad person who is in the wrong. We might not be able to understand why we believe there is an objective moral code to the universe, but we believe it. Some people believe it's because of religion. Some people believe it just is. If you was to ask a room of 10 people, or 100 people, or 1,000 people, or 1,000,000 people, that if a person believes it's okay to kidnap a child, they are wrong. Most people would probably agree, no matter how large a group you asked. They would believe that that person is objectively wrong. It's not a matter of opinion, end of discussion. The problem is, accepting objective reality means accepting that we are sometimes wrong about morality. It means accepting that morality is fact and that our opinions on it don't matter when the facts are against us. It means not being contradictory in our beliefs and always remaining consistent. If X is wrong in one situation, then X is objectively wrong. So, if beating a dog is wrong, then beating a pig is wrong. If beating a child is wrong, then beating an adult is wrong. If we cannot accept when we are wrong about morality, then we are effectively telling ourselves that we are the ones who determine objective reality. Effectively, you're telling yourself that you are God. You are telling yourself that morality is fact, but you are the one who determines those facts, and everyone around you is wrong. There's a name for this mindset. It's called narcissism. If we believe that animal abuse is wrong, then we objectively must believe that killing animals is animal abuse, and it is wrong, even when we've contributed to it or benefited from it. If kicking a dog is wrong, then kicking a pig is wrong. If keeping an orca confined in a tank at SeaWorld is wrong, then keeping a chicken confined in a pen is wrong. If stealing a monkey's children and shooting them dead in front of their mother's eyes is wrong, then dairy and eggs are both wrong, because both of those industries do the same thing. And so on and so forth. And if we believe that standing up for a victim is more important than hindering a person's freedom of action, meaning stopping someone from committing an act of theft or assault is more important than allowing that person to make their own choices and potentially harm another being, then we must apply that to our belief in animal rights. If you would step in to stop someone hitting a stray dog, then you already believe that activists are right. Once we have come to terms with objective morality, it is our decision whether we will do something about it. If you were at a house party and you saw a drunk man harassing an underage woman, would you step in and stop them? And if you saw someone else step in, would you tell them to stop interfering into the lives of others and to live and let live? All that is required for evil to prosper is for good men to do nothing, for good people to do nothing. During the Second World War, there were many people in Germany who disagreed with Hitler and what the Nazi Party were doing. We know for a fact that many were morally opposed to the concentration camps, but most of those people did nothing. And so holding the opinion that what was happening was wrong was ultimately worthless to the victims. They may not have been contributing to the issue themselves. They weren't actively informing on people, they weren't enlisting to take part, but in the grand scheme of things, that inaction probably didn't seem like enough. I often have people approach me after using these arguments and tell me that the two things are not comparable, and that I can't compare child abuse or historical atrocities or sexual assault in reference to animal cruelty. There may be people among you that are shaking your heads at me, but the thing is, I'm not here to tell you that those things are the same. I'm not here to tell you that all wrongdoings are equal, and I'm not here to tell you that killing an animal is the same as killing a person. That's not the point I'm trying to make at all. But if a stranger punches you once, or a stranger beats you to within an inch of your life, both actions are morally wrong. And you could use the same reasoning to explain why those actions are wrong, without people believing that you were saying that the two actions were equal. Animal agriculture is destroying our planet. Land animals are being killed in the billions every year, and experts believe that that figure would move up to the trillions if you included marine life. It's legal, but it's not humane. As people who are aware of the suffering, as members of the only very small group that have not fallen for the propaganda or have made the connection, or at least willing to learn about veganism, we are the only ones that can hope to make things change. For the animals, we're their only hope. As human beings, we have an obligation to speak out against injustices wherever we see them. We do not face firing squads, life prison sentences, or the gas chambers for saying what's on our minds or in our hearts. We won't lose our lives if we speak out against animal wrongs wherever we see them. But the animals do lose theirs if we don't, so we must. So this brings me on to the final and pivotal point of the speech. What difference does a small group of activists make? What difference can one person make? The most recent statistics show that between 5 and 10% of the UK's population are vegetarian, and around 1% on top of that are vegan. With people constantly telling us that the world is not going to change, it's hard to keep hope. When I find myself debating veganism with a non-vegan, once they've exhausted all other arguments, and I've attempted to do my best to prove them wrong irrefutably on every other point, they always turn to one last Hail Mary. Yes, but me going vegan is not going to make a difference. That measly little 1% is nothing compared to the 1%, compared to the 99%. And this always bugged me. I didn't like the idea that it could be right, so I started to do some research into social change throughout history. And this is what I came back with. I read a study recently that showed that throughout history, statistically, social justice movements had needed a certain percentage of people campaigning actively for their cause before they started to instigate a wide-scale change. This goes for the abolitionists fighting to abolish slavery, for the suffragettes fighting for equal rights for women. Can anyone here hazard a guess as to what percentage of people was needed before that landslide change started to be observable? And any guesses at all, sort of a ballpark figure? 10%? 10%? It's a good guess. It's lower than that. Any 5%? It's actually lower than that. Any guesses? I'll tell you, it's actually 2%. The answer is 2%. Once a cause has 2% of any group of people actively campaigning for it, the rest of the population start to take that cause seriously. So if you were in a group of 100 people, I read a psychological study that showed you would only need to prove to one person that your cause was right and that they should help you campaign for it before the other 98 people would start paying attention, before landslide change would be possible. That's not to say that if 2% of the world were to go vegan, the world would automatically follow. But the evidence shows that with 2% of any group campaigning for a cause, wide-scale change begins to happen. 1% of the UK is already vegan, and many vegetarians are already showing an interest in veganism. That's why activism is so important, because we don't need to convince the 100%. We only need to convince the 2% that our cause is worth fighting for. And that shouldn't be too hard, considering the future of the planet is at stake. Activism is a broad thing. It doesn't mean standing in the streets, waving a sign and screaming meat is murder, or slapping chicken McNuggets out of people's hands. It doesn't mean breaking onto factory farms and breaking cages open and facing prison sentences. It doesn't mean donning a balaclava and getting into fights with hunters. It can mean those things, but it simply means getting active for a cause. Everyone can be an activist, and there are so many ways that they can do it. You can be firm and passionate, or calm and logical. There are so many ways to help animals, and I'm going to touch on a few of those now. But first of all, I will clarify that none of these forms of activism can be considered forcing your views on anyone. This is something that I hear people say far too often. And the day I see someone forcing tofu down someone's throat, or physically blocking their access to dairy and meat, I might see the argument that animal rights activists are forceful as valid. But the majority of the time, we're simply giving people information and debating them. And that doesn't count as forcing anything. No one has ever been forced to do anything by a Facebook post, or a poster, or a leaflet, or a free sample. The only beings being forced here are the animals being forced into slavery, forced into confined spaces, forced to give birth, forced into slaughterhouses, forced to give up their bodies, their milk, their eggs, their fur, their flesh. The only people being exploited are the people who are out of work, and the only work that they can find is in slaughterhouses and factory farms. And the statistics show that these people have some of the highest rates of depression and suicide out of any other career on the planet. In Canada recently, this isn't actually in my speech because I only read this morning, but in Canada recently, they were finding they couldn't find enough people to work in factory farms and slaughterhouses. So they came up with a piece of legal statute suggested to the government that immigrants or refugees trying to come into the country from Syria would be allowed in if they would agree to work in slaughterhouses and factory farms. People who were fleeing oppression and violence were told they could only get to safety if they would commit oppression and violence on other beings. The first and easiest form of activism is social media activism. This can be hugely effective and requires the least amount of effort, and it simply entails sharing content on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Google+, whatever, YouTube. If you start joining vegan Facebook groups and subscribing to vegan YouTube channels, the content will come to you. All you need to do is press the share button. Sometimes it feels like our non-vegan friends will just switch off and ignore the comments, but I promise you they will not. For a year, I was posting vegan content on my Facebook page, with only ever my vegan friends commenting. It felt like an echo chamber. What's the point of preaching veganism to vegans? I have plenty of non-vegan friends, but they didn't seem to be reacting to my content. But a year on, I received these messages. Now, I wanted to get a few more messages, but I had to scroll quite far back in Facebook conversations to find these messages, and these were the only ones I could find in the time constraints. But these are 3 examples of non-vegan people who'd seen my Facebook posts, and within the first year of me being vegan, took an interest in veganism. All 3 of them, well, 2 of them actually, are now vegan, and the other one is a vegetarian. Since then, I found out that many more people have been turned vegan by my social media posts alone, and I wasn't even putting any effort in. I was just pressing the little share button. Sometimes people will be hostile, and this is what scares a lot of people off. The thought that a close friend will get angry at a post and comment angrily, and people will fall out with you. Just remember that this simply means that people are paying attention to the content and recognizing that it conflicts with their worldview. They're angry because they feel confused and conflicted. If they were sure in their lifestyle and they were sure that they were right, then they wouldn't care. The only important thing to do is to fact check. Veganism doesn't benefit from us feeding people misinformation. Don't tell people that veganism cures cancer, because it's not true and they won't believe it. Show them scientific studies. Show them that the facts are already on our side enough as it is. There's no need to exaggerate those facts or to make things up, because it seemingly validates the already true facts we have on our side. If you feel comfortable trying this out, you can take online activism to the next level. If you're artistic, you can create pieces of art or comic strips promoting veganism. Vegan Sidekick, for example, has converted countless people through the use of funny comic strips. He now has a social media following of 133,000 people. If you are musical, songs are a great way to elicit an emotional response in people. The punk band Goldfinger has millions of fans across the world and have written multiple songs about the horror of animal testing and factory farming. An activist I met earlier this year called Kyle O'Sullivan, with no musical experience, made a rap video in his spare time, which was just about reasons for going vegan, and it now has 143,000 views on YouTube, and even more on Facebook. There are vegan YouTubers who simply film themselves talking about veganism, and who have hundreds of thousands of followers. There are aspiring filmmakers making short films and documentaries. I've seen several short films over the past year intended to make people think about veganism that have gotten thousands of views on YouTube. For example, Land of Hope and Glory is currently doing a tour around the UK. I've been to 3 of their screenings, and the largest amount of people I saw at any one screening was 80 people. And I believe that out of those 80 people, 33 of them said that they would go vegan. 2 of them were close friends of mine, went along to the screening and promised me to go vegan. This was earlier this week, and to this day they're saying that they're looking for vegan recipes. They keep messaging me, asking for more information about it. If you like working with children and prefer to only preach activism to people who want to hear it, there's a charity called Animal Aid, who have a school speakers program where they train speakers to go into schools and do talks on animal rights and sometimes even vegan cookery demonstrations. They're invited to the schools by the teachers, the parents and the students, and they are hugely popular. I'm part of the program and have only ever received positive feedback. I'd written into my speech to show you some of that feedback, but I did actually forget to put the feedback in the presentation. But because you're not preaching, you're going in and talking to people who've invited you to be there, no one ever complains. And I found that the children at these talks are more open-minded than many of the adults that I've spoken to about veganism, because they're still learning and they're not so set in their ways. If you're comfortable going to public events, they're a great way to meet new vegans and to start networking and to learn more. They range from standing in the streets handing out free samples and leaflets and flyers about veganism and animal agriculture to marching through the streets of London or Reading or Birmingham. If this is something that might interest you, then come along to our table or come and talk to me at the end of the talk, and I can explain to you how you can get involved. Like I said at the beginning, I'm here on behalf of Oxford Vegan Action. We set up monthly outreach events in Oxford City Centre. From July 2017, when Oxford Vegan Action was established as an official organisation, when we have managed to give out fully comprehensive leaflet packs to over 3,000 people in Oxford city centre alone, and we aim to reach a further 10,000 people in Oxford by giving more leaflets within the next 12 months. We also take part in Anonymous for the Voiceless Cube of Truth events, which go on across the world and are a very organised and official event. And that's aimed at making veganism look presentable, look appealing, and those events I've seen to be widely successful. Many of the people we talk to agree that they will consider going veganism after seeing just a few short clips of factory farm footage. Our tally at our last Cube of Truth event was 70 people agreeing to consider going vegan. The more activists we have attending our outreach events, the more seriously the general public will take us. If you're a university student, then it's likely that there are other vegans at your university. The majority of vegans that I've met recently, new vegans that I've met recently, have been young people. In fact, you might even have a vegan society at your university. If there isn't one, you can always form one, but I know for a fact that Oxford Brookes University has a vegan society, and some of their members help in our activist group. Some people have time and no money, and others have money and no time. It's a catch-22. I work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, most days. I miss out on many activist events, and a lot of the events I go to I have to take time off for. But as a result, I have money. I can give just a few bucks a month to animal charities and animal sanctuaries, and that helps a lot. I would suggest, if you're interested in doing that, finding maybe a local animal sanctuary, as they appreciate the money a lot more. Do a quick Google search, but you have to do your research, because some animal sanctuaries are not 100% vegan, which can tend to be hypocritical. They will breed and sell their animals, which defies the point of an animal sanctuary. But by giving just a few quid a week to an animal sanctuary, they appreciate the money, and you can be making a change even if you don't have the time to do so. Petitions are also important. It only takes a few clicks. It can be done online. And as someone who has, as someone who has worked in the legal sector, I can testify to their impact. They raise awareness for an issue, so as well as signing, sharing them really helps. Remember, any action taken to promote veganism is activism. If you have non-vegan friends, inviting them round for a meal at your house to save money rather than going out to eat will ensure that they can see that vegan food is tasty. Whereas if you go out to eat with them, you'll all spend more money, you'll likely have to watch them eat meat, and if the topic of veganism comes up, which it often does at meal times, you'll be trying to convince them whilst they're eating non-vegan food, which is much, much harder. If you like the idea of sitting down to watch a film with your friends, there's documentaries you can watch, or if you don't think that your friends would really want to sit down and watch a vegan documentary with you, there's actually fiction films out there that are based around promoting the idea of animal rights. There's a film on Netflix now that's called Okja, which is a action-adventure film following a young girl who tries to save her mythological genetically enhanced pig from being slaughtered. I've managed to convince friends to watch this because it appeals as an action film, it has a trailer, and it seems more exciting, but it also tends to make people think. When I first went vegan, I didn't have a single vegan friend. I've since converted 5 friends to veganism. Most of them have been vegan for a couple of years now, as well as 1 family member. I've converted 3 family members vegetarian, and countless other friends, I've lost count now, most of which show intentions of converting to veganism. Just the other day, 2 of my friends agreed to go vegan. 2 people that I never thought would have considered it before. And although this is a small change, it makes a difference. It is important to remember that we're just trying to convince the small group. The more people we have on our side, the more people will take us seriously. It's also important to remain kind, but also firm and unwavering. You will get into arguments and debates with people, but use that as a chance to make them think. Don't raise your voice however much you want to. Don't sink to insults. Do not waver or admit to defeat. Always remember that those debates are a form of activism. Remember, you have the facts, and you have no reason to get heated. Often, I have ended debates by turning non-vegan friends vegan, but much of the time it's not the person that I'm debating with that comes over to veganism. It's someone who's listening. If the debate is on social media, it's someone who's reading the comments. If the debate is at a social gathering, it's often someone who's just passively sat off to the side, taking in the information. That only ever happens when I remain calm. If we stay rational and argue with logic and common sense, the other person suddenly starts to look like the irrational one, the extremist, and we suddenly start to look like the one with the facts. And finally, it's important for vegans to watch the documentaries and read the scientific studies and articles aimed at converting people vegan. It's important for us to attend film screenings and lectures and speeches and public events. We may already be vegan, however, these things serve two purposes: to motivate us and to educate us. If I hadn't kept researching diet and lifestyle after going vegan, I wouldn't be able to answer all the questions that people throw at me about science of nutrition and dietary change, or the effect of animal agriculture on the environment, or the complex legalities of UK slaughter practices. As a vegan, many people will automatically see us as illogical and irrational, so we need to always do our best to stay educated to the highest degree possible, because it's always going to be an uphill battle to be the most informed person in the room, because it's even harder to convince someone that you are right when they've already decided that you're a stupid extremist before you've even started talking. Remember, it only takes one pebble to start an avalanche. When people ask you what one person can do, and they tell you that one person can't make a difference, turn to them and ask them if they think Nelson Mandela or Mother Teresa or Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks made a difference, or Alan Turing, the man who won us World War II, or Desmond Doss, the man who saved 75 people alone on Hacksaw Ridge. And then ask them if they think that Rasputin made a difference to history, or Christopher Columbus, or Genghis Khan, or Adolf Hitler, or Napoleon. One person has the capacity for greatness, or to commit horrible atrocities single-handedly if they have the right motivation. It doesn't mean that that person is special. It just means that they're passionate. As a vegan activist, you won't have to be just one person fighting for a cause. You don't need to be special because you're part of a movement. Each person in this movement is heavily motivated for animal liberation. Each person advocating a life of peace and non-violence. You don't need to be Alan Turing or Rosa Parks, but we do need you, and we need all of you. The world does need veganism, even if people don't want to admit it. If you do want to get involved with more activism, there are so many ways that you can do that. If you're an active person who likes being out in the countryside, join the fight against the badger cull, or the hunt saboteurs, for example, or the hunt monitors. If you like talking to people and debating, get involved in social media activism or our street activism events. If you're an artistic person, you can write songs, go to open mic nights, you can draw pictures, you can do illustrations. I have friends who write poetry about veganism. I have friends who make paintings and sell them. I have friends who write songs and go to open mic nights and perform them. And although this seems like it's not really going to do any different, it's just sort of a nice outlet. As human beings, we're emotional people. We're driven by emotion. The majority of people who turn towards veganism do it because they've had an emotional response to a stimulus, to a piece of footage, to a picture, to a piece of information. We're emotional. Songs, art, they all elicit emotion. And I've known people to be turned vegan by musicians, by celebrities, by fictional films. if you want to get involved, or if you have any questions, come up to me, ask me questions at the end if you're not confident putting your hands up. But I'm going to have a short opportunity now for anyone to raise their hands if they have any questions about my talk, about veganism, about anything that you'd like me to elaborate on. Do we have any questions? Yep.
What are your opinions on this concept of humane animal slaughter?
Okay, so that's a very good question. Do you know what humane means? This is always what I ask people when they bring up humane slaughter.
Humane is like well-treated.
Yeah, that's a pretty standard response that people give. They say well treated, they say killing without pain. The definition of humane is having or showing compassion or benevolence. My response to your question would be by giving another question back to you. Do you think that there is a compassionate or benevolent way to kill someone who doesn't want to die? And we take a look at what our government has labelled as humane slaughter practices. And some people decide that they're okay with that. But if they actually watch the footage, most people decide that it doesn't look humane. If slaughterhouses really were humane, then when our pet dogs and cats got sick and needed to be euthanized for their own benefit, because their lives were too much pain, we would take them to the slaughterhouse to put them down, not to the vet to save money. But we recognize that it's not a nice place for animals to be. We wouldn't want an animal that we loved to go there. I think it's problematic to suggest that there is a humane way to kill something that doesn't need to die. And as I've said in the talk, it's entirely unnecessary. Vegans have proved that we don't need meat, dairy and eggs in our diets. We don't need to wear fur or leather. So at the end of the day, it is unnecessary. It's not for our survival. Does that answer your question? Yeah? Okay, great. And any other questions at all? Anything, even if it feels stupid, it's fine. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Zach. I wonder if you have any up-to-date figures on how many animals might, on average, be saved by each vegan over the course of a year.
Okay, so I wouldn't want to throw out a statistic without really looking into it, because my information on that is quite old. But I do know that there's a website online called the Vegan Calculator. If you put in the amount of time that you have been vegan, it calculates based on supply and demand statistics and current animal agriculture statistics, the amount of animals that you will have saved. Last time I put any information in there, to be fair, was about a year and a half ago, and I'd been vegan for a year and a half, and it claimed that I had saved 76 animals in that time. When it comes to things like chickens and fish, when we eat those animals, that's an entire animal just in one meal. So the statistics can be quite high, but I think it would vary quite drastically from person to person. But if people are interested in finding out information on that, look up the Vegan Calculator and it will give you exact statistics. Anything else at all? Yes, at the back? Yeah. Yeah. So I usually have, I get that question quite a lot too. I usually have sort of a two-pronged answer to that. Firstly, the idea that humans are sort of, people always use the word carnivore. Carnivore actually means existing on a diet solely of meat, which we obviously don't. We can eat fruit and vegetables, which means we're omnivores. All omnivores can live quite healthily on a balanced plant-based diet if they take care with it. The theory of hunter-gatherer comes from the theory of evolution. We evolved from Homo Neanderthal species who were similar to the great apes. The great apes who are on an entirely plant-based diet. And most experts believe that we didn't start eating meat until about the Ice Age. when growing crops and vegetation became much more difficult. Entire crops were eradicated, and the only way to survive was by hunting. So we did need to, if we hadn't have hunted at that point in time, it's likely that large portions of the human race would have died out. As a result, we moved from a frugivorous species to a omnivorous species. The problem is that throughout recent history, the last 1,000, 2,000 years, the amount of meats that we've been eating has risen. So originally we were eating meat completely out of necessity during the Ice Age. It wasn't healthy for us, but it was the only way to survive. As the consumption of meat and dairy and eggs has gone up, statistics show that the rates of diabetes, heart disease, osteoporosis have also gone up. There are two determining factors that tell us that we're not biologically supposed to be meat-eating species. The first is our physical biology, our teeth, the way we stand. All natural carnivores, all natural predators have claws and fangs and have powerful legs and abdomen so that they can move fast and track at speed. They're able to kill with their teeth and their claws. Humans can't do that, which is why we had to invent tools. If I brought a pig in here and asked anyone to come forward and try and kill it with just their hands and teeth, the best they'd probably be able to do would be to tickle it, I imagine. It's because we're not natural meat eaters. If I brought a chicken in, maybe you could kill it, but you probably wouldn't be able to eat it raw. We cook meats because they're not a natural part of our diet. A little scientific piece of information for people who believe that we are naturally omnivorous. A natural carnivorous or omnivorous animal has an intestinal tract that is about 3 to 5 times the length of their torso, and that's because they're eating literal decaying flesh. So they want to pull the nutrients out of it as quickly as possible and then push out the cholesterol, the highly acidic animal proteins, the sulfites, before they do any harm to their body, so short intestinal tracts. Frugivores and herbivores have intestinal tracts that are about 8 to 10 times the length of their body, which are much, much longer, because plant matter doesn't have any natural cholesterol, doesn't have a high acidity, doesn't contain the sulfur, and so doesn't have the detrimental effects on the digestive system. When you push animal protein and cholesterol through a intestinal tract that's not designed for it, that's when you start to get clots, that's when you start to get diabetes, osteoporosis, and that's why lions, for example, don't get blood cancers and heart disease and osteoporosis, and we do, because they're naturally meant to process a diet like that. The thing that people always bring up is our canine teeth. The animal on the planet with the largest canine teeth is actually the hippopotamus, which is completely herbivorous. Canine teeth actually have nothing to do with meat eating. They're to do with defense. If we were a natural meat eater, we'd have fangs. So yeah, like you said, at some point in history we needed to eat meat. The second prong I would always use in answer to that question is, we might have needed it at some point. Vegans have proven that we don't need it now. If we don't need it, is there any ethical reason to justify doing it? If we descended into another ice age and all of the plant crops on the planet were ravaged, then I imagine a lot of vegans would go back to eating meat out of survival. But we don't need to do that. In fact, we feed 2/3 of the world's plant crops to livestock already. So if we stop breeding those livestock, then we would have enough plant mass to feed the entire human population of the planet several times over. But because we're feeding it to cattle and to pigs and to other animals, often in third world countries, a lot of people in those third world countries go without. I hope that answers the question. Okay, let's just check if we've got time for maybe one more question, and if not, then people can feel free to approach me with any questions. Anyone else? Yep, go ahead.
Say, like bearing witness and going to vigils is like a good form of animal activism.
Yes, that's something that I forgot to bring up. So, for those of you that don't know, a vigil is where a group of activists will go along to a slaughterhouse and will witness as the animals are being brought in to be slaughtered. Often they will block off the access to the slaughterhouse for as long as possible, try and give the animals inside some water, some care and some love before they go to their deaths. Yes, I think that vigils are really, really great form of activism for two reasons. They motivate activists extremely well. When people go along to vigils, they tend to come away feeling like they need to do more for animals, need to get more involved. Every non-vegan that I've seen go to a vigil has given up meat on looking into the animal's eyes. So going to vigils is great to motivate us, to really remind us why we're doing what we're doing, remind us why we're vegan, and also film it, take pictures and show people the conditions that these animals are in. Often they're packed in quite tightly into these transportation trucks. A lot of them get sick or injured just on the way to the slaughterhouse. So it's important to share that evidence and show people. There's not very many regulations that cover how we transport animals. There's regulations that cover how we slaughter them, very basic regulations, but there aren't very many regulations that cover the transport. And most of the animals are pretty afraid, pretty terrified by the time those doors are open. So it's a real eye-opener getting involved in that. If people want any more information on getting involved in vigils, again, come and talk to me, and that's something that we can give you more information on. Okay, I think we've just about run out of time, but feel free to come up and have a chat with me if you'd like to. And thank you everyone for coming and listening. Okay. Enjoy the rest of the festival, everyone.